The morning was quiet in Portland. Emily had just finished making coffee when she noticed an envelope lying near the door. At first, she thought it might be a bill or some kind of advertisement, but when she picked it up, her heart gave a small leap. The handwriting was familiar Daniel's. Her nephew rarely wrote letters. He was the type who texted quickly or sent funny emails. Handwritten words from him felt unusual, almost heavy, as if they carried something more than just casual news. Emily sat at the kitchen table, turning the envelope in her hands. It was simple. No decorations, only her name written in careful strokes. She traced the letters with her finger before opening it. She wasn't sure why. But a quiet voice inside told her this letter would not be ordinary. She slipped the paper out and unfolded it. The first lines made her smile. Daniel wrote about how much he missed their Sunday walks and how he remembered the way she always reminded him to. Notice the little things, flowers blooming, children laughing, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street. He thanked her for always listening when he had no one else to talk to. Those words alone were enough to warm her heart. But as her eyes moved further down, the tone of the letter shifted. His words grew more serious, more personal. He spoke of family, of love, and of how people often hide their true feelings out of fear. He wrote about silence, the kind of silence that builds inside when someone longs to speak but doesn't know if the world is ready to hear. Emily leaned closer to the paper, reading faster now. He confessed that he had been carrying something inside for months, something he could no longer keep only in his heart. He said he didn't know who else to tell, that he trusted her more than anyone. And then came the line that made Emily pause, her breath catching as her eyes locked on the words. Aunt Emily, I need to tell you something about the way I see the people in my life, especially about one person I can't stop thinking about. Her hands shook slightly as she lowered the paper. Daniel was not the kind of young man to speak about feelings so openly. For him to write such a thing meant the emotions were deep, maybe even overwhelming. She stared at the paper again, her eyes scanning the sentence over and over. Who was this person he couldn't stop thinking about? Why write to her instead of speaking directly to his mother, Rachel? And why did his words feel so heavy, as though every letter carried a secret he was afraid to say out loud? The house was silent around her, but Emily's mind was anything but calm. Memories of Daniel as a boy filled her thoughts, his shy smile, the way he used to follow her around asking questions about everything. He had grown into a thoughtful young man, kind and careful with his words. But now, through this letter, he sounded like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to leap or stay behind. She read on, her heart pounding faster. He wrote that love, when it arrives, doesn't ask permission. It simply appears, and it changes the way a person sees everything. He admitted he was scared, unsure if others would accept his feelings. But he couldn't hide them anymore. He said the weight of secrecy was heavier than the risk of being honest. Emily pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart racing. This wasn't just a letter. It was a window into Daniel's soul. He wasn't just talking about affection. His words carried longing, perhaps even heartbreak. She could feel his struggle between wanting to protect himself and needing to be understood. The final lines of the letter were softer, but no less powerful. I know you've always told me the truth, even when it was hard. That's why I'm writing to you. I don't need advice yet. I just need someone to hear me, someone who won't judge me for the way my heart feels. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, words echoing inside her. She could almost hear Daniel's voice, gentle and uncertain, but filled with sincerity. She folded the letter carefully as though it were something fragile, and set it on the table beside her, outside. The world moved on, cars passed by, a dog barked. Neighbors greeted each other, but inside Emily's home, time seemed to pause. Her thoughts swirled with questions, with wonder, with a sense of responsibility. Why did Daniel trust her with this first? What did it mean for him, for the family, for the future? She knew one thing with certainty. This letter was only the beginning. Whatever truth Daniel carried inside, it was about to change more than just his life. It would ripple outward, touching everyone around him. Emily took a deep breath, staring at the folded paper. For the first time in years, she felt both fear and hope at once. Daniel had opened a door, and now she had no choice but to step through it with him, and though she didn't yet know who he had written about or what his love might mean. One thing was clear. This letter would surprise more than just her. It would surprise everyone. That evening, Emily sat by the window, the letter still folded neatly on the table beside her. The autumn sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were circling the same question over and over. Why had Daniel trusted her with something he hadn't shared with anyone else? By the time her sister Rachel arrived for their usual tea, Emily's mind was heavy with the weight of the secret. Rachel came in cheerfully, carrying a plate of muffins, her laughter filling the quiet space. Emily tried to match her energy, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea. She knew she couldn't hide the letter, not entirely. Rachel would notice her unease. After a few minutes of small talk, Emily finally said, "Daniel sent me something." "A letter." Rachel's eyebrows rose. "A letter. That's unusual for him. What did he say?" Emily hesitated, then unfolded the paper and read out the gentler parts: Daniel's memories of their walks, his gratitude, his thoughts about family. Rachel smiled, touched by her son's words. But Emily carefully skipped the lines that spoke of longing, of someone he couldn't stop thinking about. Still, Rachel sensed something more. "That's beautiful. But why do I feel you're not telling me everything?" she asked, setting her cup down. Emily looked away. She didn't want to betray Daniel's trust. Not yet. He's been thinking deeply about life. He feels things strongly. You know how sensitive he is?" Rachel nodded, though her eyes lingered on Emily, searching for the truth. When Rachel left later that night, Emily leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. She had protected Daniel's secret, but it left her with an even heavier burden. The words she had not spoken burned inside her like fire. Over the next few days, Emily couldn't stop rereading the letter. Each time, new emotions surfaced. The words about one person he couldn't stop thinking about stayed etched in her mind. She wondered who it could be. Was it someone from his university? A friend he had grown close to? Or someone older? Someone unexpected? She thought of the way Daniel always seemed guarded at family gatherings, as though carrying something he couldn't say. Perhaps this was it, the secret finally breaking free. As she read again, one line stood out more than all the others. "I know love isn't always simple, but sometimes it chooses us before we are ready." Emily whispered the words aloud, testing their weight. Love choosing us before we are ready. She felt a pang of recognition, as if she had once known that feeling herself. The idea of love arriving uninvited, unplanned, was something she understood. It made Daniel's words even more real, even more heartbreaking. One afternoon, as she sat on her porch with the letter in hand, a thought struck her. Maybe the person Daniel loved was someone close to the family. The way he wrote with both fear and tenderness suggested the connection was complicated, not something he could speak of easily. The possibility unsettled her, yet it also made her more determined to understand. She wanted to be there for him, no matter what the truth turned out to be. But a question kept returning to her mind. Why hadn't Daniel gone to his mother? Rachel loved him deeply. She wasn't always the most patient listener, but she cared. So why write to her Emily instead? The answer came quietly. Daniel trusted her because she had always been honest. When he was younger and struggling at school, it was Emily who sat with him, reminding him that mistakes were not failures, but steps forward. When he was heartbroken after his first relationship ended, it was Emily who told him it was okay to grieve, but not to lose himself. Perhaps Daniel knew that she would listen without judgment, that she would hear his heart instead of rushing to give advice. The more Emily thought about it, the clearer it became. This letter was not just a confession. It was a plea for understanding. That night, Emily dreamed of Daniel as a little boy, standing in her garden, clutching a flower in his small hands. He wanted to give it to someone, but looked too shy to step forward. The dream left her shaken because it felt so connected to the present. Daniel was still that boy, holding something delicate, unsure if it was safe to reveal. When she woke, She knew she had to be ready for whatever he chose to share. The following weekend, Rachel called. She sounded unsettled. "Emily, do you think Daniel's hiding something?" "He's been quieter lately." "More distant." Emily swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the phone. "He's growing, Rachel. He's figuring things out. Sometimes that takes silence." Rachel sighed. "Maybe, but as his mother, I wish he'd just tell me." After they hung up, Emily sat in silence, the weight of truth pressing harder than ever. She couldn't tell Rachel yet it was in her place. The letter was Daniel's story, and only he had the right to reveal it. Still, she feared what would happen when Rachel eventually found out. Would she be hurt that Emily knew first? Would she understand Daniel's feelings? Or would she react with shock? The questions spun in Emily's head, but she pushed them aside. The only thing that mattered was being ready when Daniel came to her, face to face, to speak the words he had only dared to write. The letter lay on the table, folded with care, but its message felt alive in the room. It wasn't just paper and ink, it was Daniel's heart beating in every line. And though Emily still didn't know who this mysterious person was, she could sense the depth of his emotions. It was not a passing crush or a simple infatuation. It was something deeper, something that had taken root in him. Emily knew one thing for sure. The moment of truth was approaching. Daniel wouldn't keep silent forever. The letter was just the beginning, and soon the rest of the story would unfold, whether the family was ready or not. And as she looked out into the fading light of evening, she whispered to herself, "Whatever it is, I will stand by him." What she didn't realize was that the secret Daniel carried would not only test him, but also change the entire family in ways none of them could yet imagine. The knock at the door came on a gray afternoon. Emily had been lost in her thoughts, staring at the letter on the coffee table as if the words might rearrange themselves and give her the answers she still didn't have. She stood quickly, her heart beating faster, 'cause somehow she already knew who it was. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there with his backpack slung over one shoulder. His hair was damp from the rain, and his eyes looked tired, but there was also a determination in them, as though he had made a choice before arriving. "Aunt Emily," he said softly, "did you read it?" Emily nodded, her throat tight. She motioned him inside, and he stepped in, glancing around the familiar room as though he needed courage from the walls themselves. He sat at the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together, his fingers restless. Emily sat across from him, waiting. She didn't want to rush him. She wanted him to feel safe enough to speak. He took a deep breath. "I didn't mean to confuse you with that letter. I couldn't carry it anymore." His voice cracked slightly. "The person I wrote about, Tit's not simple. She makes me feel alive in ways I didn't think were possible. But at the same time, I'm terrified of what people will think. I'm terrified of Mom." Emily's chest ached at his words. She leaned forward, her voice calm. "Daniel, you don't have to be afraid here. Whatever it is, just tell me. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Daniel's eyes filled with tears, though he blinked them away quickly. "You've always been the one I could talk to. Even as a kid, when I didn't have the words, you understood. That's why I wrote to you, because I knew you wouldn't judge me." Emily nodded, remembering all the times he had come to her as a child when he was scared of the dark, when he was unsure of himself in school, when he had felt invisible in a loud world. He had always trusted her. And now, here he was again, older but with the same searching eyes. "I can't tell Mom yet," Daniel continued. "I don't think she'd understand. Not right away. She has her expectations, her picture of how my life should look. But this doesn't fit into her picture." He paused, his voice lowering. "It doesn't even fit into mine. But it's real." Emily studied him, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of his secret. She wanted to take that weight from him, but she knew all she could do was listen. "Daniel," she said gently, "sometimes love isn't what we planned. But that doesn't make it wrong. It only makes it harder to explain." He looked at her then, his eyes raw with emotion. "But what if the truth changes everything? What if it changes how people see me? What if it changes how Mom sees me? Emily reached across the table and took his hand. The truth always changes things, but hiding it will change you more. And that's the heavier cost. For a long moment, Daniel didn't speak. The sound of rain pattered softly against the windows, filling the silence between them. Then he whispered, "Sometimes I wish I could just stop feeling this way. That it would fade. But it doesn't. It only grows stronger. I wake up thinking about her. I fall asleep with her face in my mind. I've tried to distract myself, but nothing works." Emily felt her heart twist. The intensity of his words revealed just how deeply he had fallen. This wasn't a passing crush or a fleeting attraction. It was something that had taken root in him, something that had become a part of his everyday. "Does she know how you feel?" Emily asked carefully. Daniel shook his head. "No, at least. Not fully. I think she senses it, but I've never spoken it aloud. I'm afraid of ruining what we have. I'm afraid of losing her if she doesn't feel the same." Emily gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "You can't keep living in fear, Daniel. Love is always a risk, but silence is its own kind of risk. One day, the weight will be too much." He looked down at the floor, his voice barely a whisper. "I wrote the letter because I needed someone to know. Even if I never tell her, I needed you to hear it." Emily's eyes softened. "And I hear you." "I do. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Daniel nodded, but the sadness in his expression lingered. He pulled his backpack closer as though it gave him a sense of safety. "I don't know what the future looks like, Aunt Emily. I don't even know if I'm brave enough to say it out loud. But at least you know now. At least the truth isn't completely trapped inside me." Emily watched him, her heart heavy, yet hopeful. She saw the conflict within him, the desire to be honest and the fear of the consequences. She wished she could tell him everything would be easy, but life had taught her otherwise. Love was rarely easy. After a pause, Daniel stood. "I should go. Mom will wonder where I am." Emily rose too, reluctant to let him walk away with so much left unsaid. "Daniel," she said softly, "remember this love doesn't break people. Fear does. Don't let fear decide your story." He gave her a small, grateful smile, though his eyes still carried the storm. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he left, the door closing quietly behind him. Emily stood in the silence of her living room, the echoes of his words still in the air. She felt both closer to the truth and farther from it. He had not revealed the name of the woman he loved, but he had revealed his heart, and that was enough to show her the depth of his struggle as she looked. At the folded letter on the table, she realized that this was no longer just about Daniel's secret. It was about courage, about honesty, about the power of love to push people into places they never thought they'd go. And she knew when Daniel finally spoke the full truth, it would not only surprise her, it would surprise everyone. That evening, Emily couldn't rest. The rain had stopped, but her mind kept circling Daniel's words. He had opened his heart but left the most important part unsaid, the name of the woman he loved. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how deep this story went and how it would unfold when the truth finally came out. The next day, she didn't have to wait long. Daniel returned, this time without hesitation. His steps were quicker, his shoulders straighter, though his eyes carried the weight of a decision. Emily opened the door, and before she could even greet him, he said, "I need to tell you everything." She let him in, her chest tight with both fear and relief. They sat again at the same table, but this time Daniel didn't fidget. He looked directly at her, his voice steady though soft. "The woman I wrote about, it's not someone distant. It's not a stranger. It's someone close to us." Emily's breath caught. She stayed quiet, letting him continue. "It's Claire," he said finally. "Mom's closest friend. The one who's been around since I was a kid. She's kind, gentle, and every time she walks into a room, it feels like the world slows down. I never expected it, I never planned it, but I can't deny it anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy yet honest. Emily's heart pounded. Claire was indeed close to the family. She had shared dinners with them, joined birthdays, even helped Rachel through difficult times. She wasn't just a family friend, she was like part of the family itself. Daniel. Emily whispered, searching for the right words. That explains why you've been so afraid. This is complicated, Daniel nodded quickly. I know. That's why I've kept it inside. But it's not just a crush. It's more than that. She understands me in ways no one else does. She listens. She makes me feel seen, like my thoughts matter. I don't feel like a boy around her. I feel like myself. Emily could see it in his eyes. This wasn't infatuation. This was deep, patient, and real. But she also saw the risk. Claire and Rachel were close, almost like sisters. If Rachel found out, it could shake everything. What about her? Emily asked carefully. Does she feel the same? Daniel hesitated. I think she does. There are moments when I catch it in her eyes, the way she lingers when we talk. But she never says it, and I don't push her. Maybe she's just being kind. Maybe I'm imagining it. But the connection is there. I can feel it. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. She had always known love to be messy, unpredictable. Still, this revelation was more delicate than anything she had expected. Daniel, she said softly, love doesn't always come where others expect it. But it does come where the heart needs it. What matters is how you handle it with care, with patience, with respect. Daniel's voice cracked. I don't want to hurt Mom. That's my biggest fear. She trusts Claire. She loves her. What if this ruins everything? Emily reached across the table, her hand resting on his. The truth may shake her, but lies will break her. Whatever happens, honesty is the only way forward. Tears slipped down Daniel's cheeks, though he quickly brushed them away. I'm scared, Aunt Emily, but I also feel lighter just saying it out loud. Emily gave a small, sad smile. That's what truth does. It may be heavy at first, but it frees you in the end. The following week, the truth could no longer wait. Daniel asked Emily to be there when he spoke to Rachel. They chose a quiet evening when the house was calm and the world seemed to hold its breath. Rachel sat across from them, unaware of the storm about to unfold. Daniel began slowly, his hands shaking. Mom, there's something I need to tell you. It's important, and I need you to hear me fully before you react. Rachel frowned but nodded. Go on, his voice trembled, but his eyes stayed on hers. I'm in love with someone. Someone you know. Someone very close to us. It's Claire. The words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples across the room. Rachel's face froze, her teacup trembling in her hand. For a moment, silence filled the air so thickly that even the ticking clock seemed too loud. Claire. Rachel finally whispered, disbelief in her voice. Daniel nodded. I didn't plan it. I didn't look for it, but it happened. I've tried to fight it, but it won't go away. I needed you to know because hiding it is hurting me. Rachel set her cup down, her eyes filling with tears. Emily sat nearby, her own heart pounding. She wanted to step in, to soften the moment, but she knew this was between mother and son. Rachel's voice shook. She's my best friend, Daniel. Do you understand what you're saying? Do you know how complicated this is? I do, Daniel replied quickly. That's why I've been so afraid. But Mom, it's not about breaking your trust. It's about being honest with you. I don't want secrets between us. I don't know what the future will hold, but I can't pretend my feelings don't exist. The room fell into silence again. Rachel's tears slipped freely now, but her anger never came. Instead, there was pain, confusion, and a mother's struggle to understand. Finally, Rachel looked at Emily as though searching for guidance. Emily spoke gently. Love doesn't always fit the picture we expect. But Daniel is being brave enough to show you his heart. That deserves to be honored even if it's hard. Rachel wiped her eyes and looked back at her son. Her voice was quiet but steady. I don't know how to feel right now. It's a shock. But you're my son, and I love you. That won't change. Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief, though his eyes still shimmered with fear. Thank you. Mom, that's all I needed to hear. That night ended not with answers, but with something more. Important, a fragile beginning of understanding. Rachel would need time. Claire would eventually need to be part of the conversation. And Daniel would face choices that would shape his future. But for now, the silence was broken, and love had found its voice. Emily looked around the room, the son with trembling courage, the mother with tearful eyes, the letter that had started it all resting quietly on the table. She knew their journey was just beginning. The truth had been revealed, and though it carried weight, it also carried freedom. And in that freedom, the family would learn that love, no matter how unexpected, was always meant to be spoken, never hidden.